Welcome to another episode of Leading AI, a series dedicated to helping business leaders design companies for an AI-driven future.
Leading AI with Adam Massey and Greg Wasmuth, helping business leaders build smarter companies for an AI-driven future in the cloud.
I'm your host, Greg Wasmuth, and today we have the honor of having a true visionary in the world of AI on our show, Rajen Sheth, Vice President of Google Cloud AI and Industry Solutions. Rajen, good to have you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And we also have our second guest, Adam Massey. He's the founder and CEO of F33.ai. Welcome, Adam, to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
Well, let's jump in. And Rajen, I'd love to learn just a little bit of your history. I know, being vice president of Google Cloud AI and Industry Solutions, you didn't just fall into that position, and you've had an incredible run at Google. Love to just learn about the roles you've had and what you've done for Google as you've progressed through the years.
Sure. Happy to tell you that. So I've been in the industry for a little over 20 years, and for the last 17 years I've been at Google. And so I joined Google right around the time we first started our enterprise group, which is what became Google Cloud, where we were about a 25-person group at the time, and have grown a lot since then. I helped start in what was the Google Apps product line, which became G Suite and is now Google Workspace for quite a while. Then worked on Chrome and Chrome OS for enterprise and education, as well as Android for enterprise for several years. And then over the last probably about 3.5 years, I've been in this role focused on AI. And really the key insight in what we're doing here is that we as Google are doing a tremendous amount with AI just for our own applications. We're really a truly AI first company. And what we're trying to do here is how do we actually bring that technology out to every company out there? And how do we make it so that every company can benefit from AI and they themselves become an AI first company?
That's fantastic. That's great. Adam, tell us a little about yourself.
So actually, Raj and I go back. I was actually telling Greg as we were prepping for this, when I first started at Google in 2007, Rajen was on my interview panel. And that's when we first met. And we started, working together, kind of building the Google Apps business in the very early days. And I went on to have an amazing 12-year career at Google Cloud in a lot of different roles, spanning sales, alliances. I ended up leading a big chunk of the Google Technology Alliances org right before I left. And then in 2019, I decided I wanted to really scratch this entrepreneurial itch, but I really wanted to continue my journey with Google. And I left Google to start F33, which is a modern cloud AI services company. And it was really, the idea came from during my time at Google. I saw this incredible momentum building around data science, machine learning, AI. But increasingly, I saw more and more customers who were less technology oriented trying to adopt these technologies. And I just saw a really incredible opportunity to bridge that gap and really accelerate how companies apply these technologies in production to create business impact. So that's what I've been doing. We're now a Google partner. We work very closely with the Google Cloud AI stack. And it's been a really fun 2 years so far.
Yeah, it's been an incredible time. The movement that things are happening at, the pace is so fast. Business leaders really have a challenge to keep up with it. And I love that we can just have a dialogue around this and look at the trends, where they came from in such a short time, and where they're going now. Rajen, you're in there building solutions for people. I think we can all testify to the fact that the apps that you were a part of have transformed the way business is done. I remember collaborating and saying, you have to use a Google Sheet. And people were like, this is incredible. We can be in the same document together. I've never heard of this, so that was revolutionary. And now we're dealing with, what I think is the fourth revolution, right? I mean, there's a lot of talk around how we're taking all of this information and turning it into something that really augments our intelligence. Tell us just a little bit about the trends you've seen and maybe in that and that's the reason why we, move toward this unified platform.
The trend that I've seen, and I think you said it well, that over 5 years, it's been really interesting to see how companies have started to go from AI as really just a thought to, or really a buzzword, to something where they are now really looking at it and using it in interesting ways to make a difference for their company. And so what our journey at Google has been longer than that. So we have been using AI for probably the last 10 to 15 years in really critical systems throughout Google. And as a result of that, there have been two big things that we've been able to do as a result of it. One is that we've been able to develop really interesting models and classes of models that have helped us throughout the organization. So, for example, in computer vision, we've built amazing models that help us with everything from Google Photos to Google image search to things that you see in your Pixel phone, for example. We've done that in a variety of other areas, in areas like conversation, in language, in structured data, things like forecasting and classification with structured data. And so we bring a lot of that to the table. But then in addition to that, the other important part is not just the models, but it's how do you build a model and how do you productionize a model? So we've had to build out all of the tooling that's been needed to be able to have thousands of developers build great models and put those into production so that billions of users can use them on a daily basis. So you can imagine, for example, if things start to go wrong with the AI models that power things like Google Search, that's a big issue. And so we have to get good at being able to monitor those models and being able to figure out what they're doing and be able to modify them in production to make them better and better and better. So that's really what we're bringing together with this platform. Now, what we've done over the past few years is that we've started to bring a lot of different parts of that Google infrastructure to customers. A lot of the best of Google's models with things like vision and conversation, and also with autoML, which can take those models and morph it to your particular use case. But we've also brought in our tools with our AI platform and everything that it takes to get a model into production. But those have been kind of disparate sets of tools. And what we're now doing is bringing all that together into one unified platform. And that way, all developers and all data scientists have one place they can go to get the best of Google and be able to use that to build out what they're doing. Now, the trend I'm seeing is that 3 years ago, when I first started talking to companies about AI, the vast majority of them were just starting out with it. And so very few of them actually had data science teams or AI teams. Now, 3 years later, many, many, many more of them do. And I think over the course of this decade, every single company is going to have an AI team. Just like, for example, when the internet became a big thing in the 90s, by the end of the 90s, every company had a web team. Similarly, every company is going to have an AI team, and every company is going to need the tools to use AI and deploy AI in a great way to benefit their company in their own unique way. And that's really the vision of what we're trying to do with our cloud AI platform.
That's great. Yeah, there used to be the sense where people were running experiments, testing things, exploring. But Adam, what are you seeing on the street? I mean, you're out there providing these services to companies that are saying, I want to do more with this, and I don't want it to just be an experiment on the side. I really want this to be, part of the core of our business. Tell us a little about what you're seeing out there.
I would echo Raj 100%. I think what we're starting to see now is very few companies without any AI team at all. Those companies now have pockets of expertise in these areas. And I think they're trying to find their way of how do they really kind of weave that into their kind of production fiber, how they go to market, how they transact and run business. I think one of the really interesting trends we're seeing is, tolerances in business today are shrinking, right? So what I mean by that is it used to be, how you predict what your optimal inventory levels should be, or time to market could be, or how to predict and get in front of customer turnover. You had a certain margin of error that was manageable in spreadsheets and kind of traditional business approaches. Now, as more traditional enterprises are trying to compete with internet natives, right, that are completely AI run, those tolerances have shrunk. And so now using machine learning models and AI to be predictive and to be faster and to operate within those drastically reduced tolerances, it's not a luxury. It's becoming absolutely critical to survival and, differentiation and competitive advantage and all those things. So I don't see really any companies, regardless of how traditional the industry is or how progressive it is, not thinking about AI. I think so that's a great thing, first of all, that there's a general acceptance and interest in adoption. As a services company, where we spend a lot of time is helping them figure out how do you deploy, and apply AI into your business in a way that works, is scalable, and is something that they can build on. And so you're exactly right. I think we've seen this trend moving from pockets of experimentation to now proving it in individual use cases. And then one of the areas where we're seeing a lot of emerging interest is on kind of the platform side of things. Like, how do you then go from one model or a couple models to hundreds or thousands of models and scaling that through a platform? And that's where I feel like Google's unified platform is going to be so incredibly critical for businesses, because what you can do to get to one or two models is not the same thing you need to do to scale hundreds of models across an organization with consistent levels of quality and approach and all that. So like any, technology evolution, right? And to get cheesy kind of consulting guy for a second, we're at this point where now we're seeing like companies struggling with people, process, technology. How do you put these things together, much like they did in the late 90s with web teams getting integrated into IT in a way that's seamless and scalable and a value add versus a hindrance?
That's great. Yeah, it's really interesting. What I've seen too is that some experiments were custom, as some used AutoML. They were like, well, this is already up and running. Now, how do I compare the two? Rajen, you want to talk just a little bit about what the unified platform does to help you to actually, compare things that you did custom to some of these AutoML ready to go solutions?
Yeah, great question. And what we're really doing is trying to bring all of those tools together to give you all of the various options that make sense for you. So you can compare, for example, the models that you create with things that we can create via AutoML, and you can use some of the best tools from that. So, for example, the tools that we have for model evaluation for AutoML are now things that can then be used for a broader range of models that are out there that can include your own custom models as well as models that you find from other places. And so that will make it so that you can do that kind of comparison. Plus, in addition to that, we want to make it so that you can quickly experiment and try new things to see how different things operate. Because the truth is, with a lot of these models, that's critical, that you have potentially something that you put out there, but you're not going to be able to tell if it's the right model for you until you test it out. And then you want to be able to change that, add in more data, try different models as quickly as you can. Adam said something I think that was really interesting, which is around the process. And that's something I think that goes ignored by a lot of companies, which is you can build a great model, but then integrating that into the process of both the people processes that are out there as well as the development processes are another key thing. And that's another thing that we're trying to do, which is take things like AutoML and take things like your own models and integrate that easily into your business processes and into your development processes.
That's great. It's kind of like software development. If you don't have flow to what you're doing, the term ML ops has come up a lot. And I'm sure there's a lot of business leaders out there that are like, what is that? And why do I have to worry about that now? I mean, wasn't it enough to build models and like you said with the tight tolerances, Adam, in business, what's this whole ML ops about?
Yeah, so ML ops I think is very interesting because think of it this way. Think of, say, 30 years ago when people, or 40 years ago when people were building out production systems using software development. At that time, you went from people being able to individually build out things to then getting groups of people to, in a coordinated way, build things and then having a business rely on it. And that's a big step. So one individual building a piece of code that works for one thing is one very complex part of the equation. But then getting that a broader organization to collaborate on that and then deploy it into something that's critical is a whole other part. And that's really where this concept of DevOps came out, with everything from from coordinating check-ins all the way through to how do you actually do continuous integration, continuous development within an organization. The same thing is happening right now with machine learning. A lot of machine learning and data science really used to be individual data scientists building something in a notebook, in many cases on an individual laptop, and utilizing that. But then taking that to something where many data scientists can work together on something and can work together with development colleagues. And then you have business processes that are critical to a company relying on that is a whole other thing. And that's really what ML ops is all about, is how do you take some of those concepts of DevOps, but how do you build that kind of DevOps for a machine learning world? And that is really something that we've been focusing on with our platform.
It's interesting, Adam. I'm sure you're seeing this too with companies where there's almost this whole sense of the Wild West. Some data scientists found the model to rule them all. And then what happens next week when that's obsolete, and how do you trust the core of your business? Talk a little bit about governance, and I know some of the things that you've been working on are pretty significant in the way people can design their business for this AI-driven future.
Yeah, I mean, so we've had a number of customers now. We've had the honor of being hired to help customers think through how to go through a transformation, and it's been really fascinating. Like, we've been hearing terms like, we want to become not just a data-driven company, but a data science-driven company. And so what that actually means when we work with those customers is they want to be leveraging data science and AI as much as possible in every facet of their business, whether that's customer growth, product innovation, operations, et cetera. And so there's been a handful of customers with thought leadership to realize in order to do that, it's not just a technology shift, it's a cultural shift through the organization. That touches everybody, right? How we develop products, not just, hey, let's develop a product and then ensure that those features are intelligent, but like from the ground up, how can we be innovating to leverage data science to create better customer experiences in every aspect? So that has really driven us to think more about, the 360-degree view of how to facilitate and enable that transformation. And you're exactly right. Like, things come up around strategy and culture. Data governance becomes a big thing, because if you want to now start having a consistent way to develop and validate and deploy ML models across your business, you need to have a common, standard for data and way that you think about data governance. A lot of companies are like, oh, we hadn't really thought through that to the degree that we need to in order to facilitate this transformation. And then, ML ops and things like that come up quite a bit. I think one of the things that I have been noticing, and Raj, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but like a little bit of, a couple different ways to look at ML ops. So I feel like there's this natural tendency in the technology industry to be approaching ML ops kind of like DevOps from a very technology developer standpoint. One of the things that I have been surprised by a little bit is just sometimes, in even really innovative organizations, the level of business input into model, deployment of AI, how critical that is. And so what I mean is you get a very developer-centric approach to models, and sometimes you overlook the importance of the business discovery. Like, what is the business target we're trying to achieve with a given prediction or whatnot, and really involving the business into that. So I think, what I'm seeing, and I'd love your thoughts, is like an opportunity for ML ops to be more business inclusive too, because a lot of what you're doing is validating that a use case or a business target will work in a model, and then deploying and testing the model against those business targets. And yes, there's a heavy technology dependence and underlying sort of fabric, but it's very much business centric as well.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And, it's interesting. We've learned this the hard way with particular customer deployments that we've done, where we've worked with the technical teams at one of our customers on building out a really amazing model. And then we started to realize that because they don't have the business buy-in, the models that we've developed with them can't actually be used for anything to create any business impact. I'll give you an example of this with demand forecasting. Oftentimes, we can work with the data science team to build a demand forecasting component that is leaps and bounds better than what people are doing today with their manual planning. However, on the other side of that, you have demand planners within an organization that are on the business side that have been doing this for years and years and years and have their own intuition of that. And if you can't bring both of those sides together, then the impact of what you develop doesn't really yield anything. And it doesn't make it such that the organization gets better. And so I think you're right that especially with machine learning, there's a core need to bring in the business and bring in the people, because you're actually ultimately modifying business processes as a result of this. And you're not going to be able to modify those business processes unless you have the people involved that will have to also go through that modification.
It's interesting you guys bring that up. I don't know if this is a secret or if you're allowed to talk about this, Rajen, but I've heard a lot about explainable AI. And
Yeah.
I think some of the worry people have is I have no idea why it's predicting better. And I'm really uncomfortable with that. And, there's the sense of uncertainty is, what's going on underneath the covers of that. And I don't know if explainable AI is public knowledge yet or what, but tell us a little bit about that, because I think that might be what could bridge that gap between business and the data scientists.
That is something we've been working on quite a bit over the last few years. And I do think it is something that in many cases is really crucial. It's interesting because explainability is needed in multiple parts of the cycle. So explainability is needed in the development cycle to understand, as a developer or data scientist, why your model is doing what it's doing. It is interesting when you interact with your users, whether that might be people within a business or end users outside of your business, to convince them and help them gain trust in the model. That way they can see, okay, this is telling me to do this because of these reasons. Just like you think about how you interact with the person who's giving you advice, you would want to know the rationale behind that advice. It's also really important with regulators. So especially as you go into things like financial services, in many of those cases in financial services, a lot of the models have to be explainable in order for them to actually be used at all. And so that's another area where it's crucial. So we've been developing a lot of technology that can be inserted into this to help make AI more explainable. One of the big problems has been there are types of machine learning where explainability is kind of more fundamental to it. So if you're using things like, say, it's much more easy to figure out, okay, because we started here and we got to here, what are the things that actually helped us arrive at that conclusion? But with deep learning, it's much, much, much more difficult. And so the big breakthrough that we've had over the past couple of years is how do we use explainability to explain things that come out of a deep learning model? And so now we have some really interesting approaches with things like integrated gradients that make it so that you can actually know what factors that went into the model are creating that particular output.
That's fantastic. Yeah, then it really becomes, Adam, we've talked about this, but that sense that it's augmented intelligence, not artificial. AI could be the fact that now I feel more comfortable with it if I'm seeing results like that. And, tell us a little bit, do you have any examples, Adam, where you've seen, companies that are really having to build that into their processes so that they can weave it into the company rather than it being a fringe experiment,
Yeah, I think this is all part of this domain, kind of figuring out how it can be used in every industry and every company, and everybody's got different. The regulatory ones, financial services, this is a big one, right? So like obvious examples that are sort of like poster child for explainability is loan approvals and things of that nature, where you're saying, hey, this person is a less risky bet because of a series of different signals, and is that ethical, right? Like there's all these different things that financial services companies really need to understand inside the black box as to why they're getting various different predictions. And I think you can extrapolate that to a lot of different use cases where explainability is important, not just for regulatory purposes, but so that you can validate and make sure you're making sound decisions that are in alignment with your company's values and culture, or requirements, right? So I think it's an emerging space in general, but I think it speaks to the fact that as a new technology domain, you run into issues that require sort of addressable means, right, as you go. So like you don't know what's around the corner until you get there. And as you start to deploy these in technologies in production at companies of all different sizes, you start to see different challenges you need to solve along the way to make the technology viable and useful at scale. As a result, I would say the biggest challenge I see customers dealing with right now is there's so many different point solutions they're being bombarded with for really microscopic parts of the ML value chain. And so a lot of customers are overwhelmed trying to think through, the technology component, and how do they put together the right series of technologies so that it's not overly complex, but it meets their needs. And that's one of the reasons why, again, shameless plug for Unified. I think we're so excited about this unified platform as a way to give customers a real platform-centric approach where they've got APIs and services for various things like, vision and speech, AutoML and tables, but at the same time, the platform they need to surface things like explainability and ML ops in ways that enable them to utilize a rich library of services, build ML models across an organization, and really scale it beyond the onesie twosie into a real high scale production environment. I think it's going to be fantastic for customers.
That's great. Yeah. Rajen, there's people probably that are saying, look, I'm already on AutoML. I'm doing fine. And yeah, I've got, I've done some custom training and it's working well too. And, we have our ways, we have our workarounds to, manage traffic between those two models to test. And, we've already got these things, let's just leave things the way they are, right? What would you say to someone like that just says, look, I don't want to migrate. I don't have the time. What are they missing out on if they're not migrating?
Yeah, I think what they're missing out on is being able to use multiple things simultaneously to be able to solve a problem. Because, not only are, like, for example, using two different models or two different components twice as good as using one. In many cases, it's exponentially better. And so that's what really our vision is behind this unified platform, which is giving a developer the range of alternatives and the range of components that they can use together to be able to solve a particular problem. I'll give you an example of this. You may be solving a problem where you're using a component to be able to get predictions out of structured data. But there are lots of other components that can help you turn unstructured data into structured data and then make those predictions a lot better. So, for example, if I'm doing something like a demand forecast, I may be able to take in pictures from somewhere and be able to turn that into data that I can then put into my structured model. Or I could take text from somewhere else that I could then turn into structured data and put it into my model. And those things can have an exponentially better impact and a very differentiated impact compared to your competitors. And so those are examples where using these multiple things together can really get you to a great outcome. And that's what we're really hoping to spur with this unified platform.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think that's revolutionary. I mean, it's a little thing, but it's a huge thing at the same time, right? I mean, sometimes the littlest things, create the biggest impact for businesses. And I think this platform, from what I'm seeing, to be able to test new things at the core of your company. Maybe you have a recommendation engine and you've had one that's been working pretty good. There's this giant gap to test it against other things. Now, from what I understand, you're going to be able to just direct a percentage of your traffic to a specific endpoint and see what the results are of your new engine live in production. I mean, those kinds of things were really difficult to achieve. And Adam, you talked about that just in terms of how do you get that little increase that turns into an exponential increase because you're just recommending the right things if you're in retail or commerce, right? I mean,
our goal is as a Google partner and on this platform is to utilize these technologies to help customers take a massive leap forward in their level of AI sophistication without having to go through the 10 to 15 years that Google's gone through. And I'm biased because I came from Google and I was there for a long time. But I remember in the early days of Google Apps, we'd be selling a customer and we'd tell them about, the infrastructure behind it, which is Google's now what is Google Cloud. And we talk about how Google has these algorithms that would predict disk failures. And we would just proactively, change out disks in the data center and people's minds are blown. And it's that is the foundation that has been innovated on to this point. So not only do we think it's the best platform for AI, but the ability to enable customers to kind of plug and play and really dramatically leap forward their levels of innovation and sophistication super quickly on the platform is what gets us so excited.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Are there any other secrets from Google that I'm sure there's a bunch of leaders that are dying to know, but what's coming up that people aren't talking about yet?
Well, it's a great question. There's definitely a lot of stuff that we're working on internally here. And what you're going to see is in classic Google fashion, we're going to keep making the platform better and better and better each week, each month, and continue to release more and more great functionality within that. And then in addition to that, the other big thing that we're working on is solutions where we're trying to take on some specific business problems within companies and trying to help build out an AI solution that can help people solve that. Examples of what we've seen are things like contact center automation and effectiveness and efficiency. So we have a contact center AI product that has been doing amazing things in that area. Another big area of opportunity we've seen is around automating manual document processes that are out there, paper-based processes or electronic document processes. Every business has thousands of these. And that's another area where we're seeing some amazing stuff. We've started in areas like mortgages with lending, where it's having a huge impact. And each industry has its own set of things like this. And so we've been working with leaders in each of these industries to understand what's unique about their industry and make that better. But what we're really hoping to do is that we have these solutions out there, but we have this platform by which a business can do that for themselves. They can take that and adapt the AI technologies to the unique needs of their own company and utilize that to really create some business benefit.
That's great. It's funny you say that too. I still remember about 4 or 5 years ago, I watched DeepMind beat the leader in Go, and I was like, what platform is that? I want to be on that platform. And so, I moved clients onto that platform because I was like, there's something different about this. The thing that blew me away is how easy it is to just get on and try it out, right? Like, this isn't like any business leader can just take their Google account, go over to cloud and go down the list and see AI unified and start working on this. This is very approachable. I think that people sometimes think, I've read all these articles, I'm over here, this is sure overwhelming. I don't know how to get started in this, or how to take this to the next level. I think what I've experienced, at least, and I'm not a coder, right, but more of a business leader. It's easy to just jump in and get going on this. You've made some very simple inroads for people to be able to do that, which I appreciate. And Adam, I'm sure you're seeing that too, in terms of just people's ability is just going to be made exponentially easier to try more and more sophisticated things they thought were inaccessible, right?
Yeah, and I think what's a cool testament to the platform is like our principal data scientists and CTO who have been, developing in like Python and R for years, independent of cloud, really, really enjoy and have been embracing the Google Cloud AI platform, which is a testament, right? Like, it works for a super high level of sophistication, as well as for those where you're trying to democratize it a bit more as well. So I think that speaks volumes for the platform, and it's very approachable, but it's also not something that is too simplified for your really sophisticated senior data scientists either. They're going to love it as well.
Raj, you can probably testify to scale. Google has its finger on the pulse of scale like nobody else. And if somebody is worried, well, will this be able to handle it? Tell us a little bit about that scale.
I think that is a critical thing here, is that we're using these same kinds of systems to be able to scale to supporting machine learning for applications that have billions of users on them. And so I think that is a critical part, to be able to go to scale to whatever a customer needs. But then there's the other part about it, is to elegantly present them with the options of what they can do. One thing I think that has been great for me in this role is I feel like a kid in a candy store, because there's all this amazing technology at Google that we have to draw from, that we brought into this platform. But, I look at my 8-year-old son when he goes into a candy store and he goes all over the place to try to find, this thing is great, that thing is great, that thing is great. The tough part there is that if you have all of that and it's not well organized, it's tough to actually make an impact. And that's really what we've tried to do with this, is to really organize that and make it so that you know what you have, you know the choices of what you have to operate with. You can try different things, and then you can actually make an impact in production as a result of it.
Yeah, it's like you've taken the chocolate store and the lollipop store and all the stores that make you go crazy, and you put into one store that you can go nuts with. The nice thing is there's process to it. I mean, you've taken the whole machine learning process, and the things flow together now like never before. There's no more gaps, really. Now what do you do with it? Now that you're not worried about the plumbing, right? I mean, it's funny when people talk about AI and they've watched too many movies and there's this dystopian view of it, but they don't question the fact that every single company has a database at its core. At some form or fashion, they're storing data in some database. Then it became unstructured data, and trillions of transactions could be recorded. And people have been sitting around going, what do I do with it? Does one data scientist have the mastery of what to do with all these elements and attributes across, hundreds of databases sometimes? Your marketing database, your operations, your transactional, your customer behavior. Maybe it's called 7 things, but it's really the same feature. There's an interesting migration I've seen to actually normalizing all of those different sources. Transactional, your marketing behavior, all of those things to really drive your business forward. Maybe tell us a little bit about that, and then I think we're getting close to our time here, and I've been amazed with the conversation, the things I've learned in this process for sure. But just tell us a little bit about these are the kind of challenges people are facing with what it's being called feature stores now, right? That kind of
idea. I think there are really 2 really critical points that you brought up, Greg. One is the data, and so none of this is possible unless you have the data there to be able to create the models around. And so what we're trying to do is figure out ways to make it easier for people to get the data where they want it to be, to analyze that data, to do the data cleansing, to create features out of that data that can then be put scalably into these models. And that involves not only just the Cloud AI platform, but everything underneath it with Google's data tools, things like BigQuery, things like Dataproc, et cetera. All of that is key to this entire vision. The other thing you said there that I've heard from a lot of companies is people look at AI as this big, huge thing. And so when people think of AI, they think of like self-driving cars and things like that. One thing that I think is true is that I think every company can get impact out of AI in less than 6 months. And what's important is for them to look at what is that scenario that they can enable in less than 6 months to get that first step. And I think that's what these platforms let them do, is to figure out how do they take that first step. And then once they've taken that first step, how do they iterate on it and get bigger and bigger and bigger? And I think that's the challenge I would put out for every company out there, is figure out what is that thing that you can get to in less than 6 months.
I 100% agree. And that is essentially what we do, right? Is I think the thing that adds a lot of value is to figure out where is the low hanging fruit? What are some use cases that are great use cases for AI that you'll get a disproportionate business impact from, and then go do that. And then the results really make the case for that iteration that Rajen refers to, right? And so that has been a proven formula for us. That's sort of like customer scenario A. Let's go find a use case and build a win together. And then kind of the next scenario is, okay, you've got 1 or 2 or 3 of these wins. Now, how do we start to build the process and the platform to enable you to do hundreds in a consistent, high quality way? And that's really where MLOps and the unified platform comes into play.
There's kind of a learning curve too, right, Adam? I mean, there's ways to do this that are really slow, like trying to find the right resources and get them up to speed. And then there's ways to accelerate it with a company like F33, right, where you can even train people within a company, but you can get them up and running on a use case more quickly, more effectively, because you've bounced off the ropes a little and fallen down and gotten up, and you can really save them all of that headache and accelerate that for them, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a key part of our value proposition. Is a lot of our customers have a scenario where they've got their first kind of group of data scientists, but maybe they're more junior, they're not quite as experienced, but they're really smart people. A lot of times they will hire our team so that they can get a handful of PhD, sort of principal and senior level data scientists in to augment that team so that they benefit from the experience we've had in terms of just the years at doing this, the experience in terms of how to scale it beyond those initial use cases. And so we'll help them, through augmentation of their team, get really sophisticated really quick. And then a lot of times, we'll roll out as they start to build up that muscle internally, or we'll even help them hire those teams, or some companies will keep us on as sort of like their ML lab. But acceleration is kind of our key value proposition. We want to help companies get to value, get to business outcomes as quickly as possible.
I like that. And Rajen, does that help Google to have a company like F33? I'm lobbing that question to you, but
enormously. And Adam can attest to, when we first started out Google Apps, the thing that was critical for us was to have great partners out there that can take this and apply it in the way that's needed for each of our customers. And I think that's what we have here with F33, is a company that really understands these products incredibly well and can actually make an impact with customers using this technology that we have. And so it's hugely beneficial to us and hugely beneficial to our customers.
That's great to hear. Yeah. There's a lot of areas to Google, and there's a lot of deep experts at Google, and sometimes that can be a strength, but sometimes that breadth of experience where somebody knows a lot about a lot, a little about a lot or a lot about a lot, is difficult. For Googlers, they can focus on their area of expertise, and sometimes the industry solution doesn't come to fruition as quickly for somebody because they don't know how to piece data labeling, let's say, in the flow along with hyperparameter tuning. And I'm throwing out buzzwords, but you get the idea that there's a lot of little specialties that somebody like F33, they've got these PhDs that see the whole breadth because they're dealing on the street, boots on the ground, day to day, helping companies actually deliver results. And ultimately, there's two results that they help deliver: increase revenue or reduce cost, and both, feed their way to the bottom line. And so that kind of razor's edge to finding what the, what that minimum viable product is, what's that first experiment, is what I think, a company like F33 does so well at, is understanding that breadth of technology that you offer, and then with needle-like accuracy saying, only focus on this because I know that will get you the best result. And Adam, even in that, there's been some failures where people have said, I wanted to do this, and the fact is you can walk through that process, but you can help people fail quickly too. This is okay. This is what experimentation is part of. Not every experiment is going to go well, but a company that says, oh, we tried that 6 months ago, it doesn't work, that's really helpful to people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's we're excited about the partnership, and Rajen, we thank you for all your support, and we're excited to help make this migration to the unified platform successful and really help customers dramatically advance their capabilities and business outcomes with Google Cloud. So thank you so much.
Well, we appreciate
thanks
it
for coming on the show. This was really fantastic, Rajen. And
Thank you.
Adam,
Thank
thanks
you
again for being there. And I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the future with more features and more capabilities and better solutions targeted to specific business use cases. So excited to have you here. Thank you for your time, and I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you both. And looking forward to all that we have in store over the course of the next few years.
Thank you.